Well, Steve, what is the aim of the exercise for this, the final game of your league season?
Well, look, I mean, the most difficult part I've had since we've qualified to get to the final of the FA Cup, no matter how I've tried, I've basically failed to keep the focus on them, because it's been normal for a club of our size, I suppose, to be just swept away with the FA Cup final, and of course, our results since the semi-final haven't been that great either. So we can't wait to get there quick enough, to be honest. And what I'll do is what I did against Manchester the other day. I will let a few have a bit of a break, get some football into people who obviously come into the equation, people like Matty Fryatt, and we're waiting for McGregor and Aluko as we speak now, so it's a big day for them today and tomorrow, and also McShane as well. So all of them things I'm whirling around in my mind at the moment, just to make sure we pick the right formula.
Is there a concern that players have got a mind on it, and when things happen in the midst of the game, they're a little tentative maybe?
Well, look, to win a game in the Premier League, we all know how difficult it is. We know what a tough season it's been for all of us in the bottom half of the division. You know, obviously there's 3 clubs now who've gone, but what a fist of it they've made as well. The whole of the bottom end of the division has been quite a remarkable season. Usually 1 or 2 are adrift, and of course with Sunderland, the results they've had, it's been quite a remarkable end to the season in terms of the bottom half of the division. We're all separated by 4 or 5 points, and it just shows you the fine margins between us all.
I mean, the Myler incident, is that one of those where players are now mindful of the stakes?
Yeah.
How high the stakes are at this stage?
Well, look, it's the highlight. It's a highlight of anybody's career, is to go and play in an FA Cup final, without doubt. I mean, it's been undermined a little bit of late for whatever reason. The actual occasion when it comes is a fantastic occasion, and of course, people are absolutely want to play next weekend, and we've seen that. You know, we were awful last week, if we're being honest, against Villa, awful, and so the quicker we get out of that mindset, and the quicker Everton's out the road tomorrow, and the big thing I've got to stress is that we still want to make sure we get a result against Everton, because, as I've said repeatedly, a couple of places up the division can mean another player next year, so it's still all to play for.
Because potentially, I mean, depending on the goal swing, you could get up to 12th, I think, couldn't you? Depending on what else happens.
Yeah, I mean, that shows you how tight it is. I mean, Sunderland have been in the bottom 3 for weeks, and all of a sudden they win the other night and they've gone up to 15th. It's been that close. That's how difficult it's been, and you know, it's been relentless. So thankfully we've got there with 2 games to spare. But I have to say, the FA Cup, no matter how I try and dress it up or disguise it, has been a distraction, and a nice distraction. Let's be honest, but it's been very, very difficult to keep everybody's mind on it. Even today, you know, the suits being measured and all the rest of it. It's been non-stop FA Cup final, and that's the way it's been.
It's a good game to finish with, though, isn't it? The league programme, Everton.
Well, Everton had such a great season, and have been very, very close to qualifying for the Champions League, which is remarkable for them, and they've got great players with a big history, big tradition, and Roberto's done, you have to say, very, very well in his first season. So it's a great game to finish with. Let's hope we can go and get a result and maybe finish 12th, and that would be, for me, then that would put the icing on the cake, because up until the last week or so, we've always been 11, 12, 13 for 7, 8 months. It's a shame that in the last month of it, then we've dropped down a bit, but as I said, I think there's reasons for
that. Elsewhere, B teams and all the rest of it, the FA Commission.
I haven't really studied it. I've just been studying the qualification for Europe, as we were just speaking before we go into the interview. So I haven't really seen the blueprint. It'll be interesting reading. I mean, look, we've got to try and address something, haven't we? You know, we're not producing the players that we used to produce, and of course we all want England to do well, so it'll be interesting to have a good read of it myself, to have a look at it and see what the recommendations are, because something has to change, because as I said, we all want England to succeed, and we've got the best and biggest product in the Barclays Premier League, but that may be a distraction to producing the players that we all need.
But you've just been saying about the Europa League, how difficult it's going to be for you to put together a squad because of restrictions in terms of homegrown players and all the rest of it. So you couldn't possibly put out a Hull City B team, could you? Because you haven't got the personnel to do it.
We certainly haven't. We're not at that level, and I suppose it's geared. And I've only seen the outsert, and I don't know the ins and outs. But if you look at the big teams in Europe, like Barcelona and people like that, they've got a B team that plays in a lower league, which is understandable. You can quite understand that, rather than let your players go out on loan. You know, some clubs don't want their players to go out on loan because they don't play the same way as what they do with the parent club. So all sorts of things we've got to be looking at. It is a big problem that we do have, because we do have a fantastic product in the Barclays Premier League. It's proven for everybody to see, but it could be to this distraction of not giving the younger players a chance, and that's always got to be a problem for us.
You've managed in the lower leagues. If your team came up against Manchester City reserves effectively, is that a proper fixture or not?
Well, we have to admit now that these big super clubs now have a wealth of players, and you can only name 25. That's the problem that everybody has in UEFA or the Premier League, and there's certain restrictions in UEFA too. So you can only name 25. So what do you do with the rest? I mean, I think it's a decent proposal. Rather than letting them all go out on loan, why not? Why not have, Manchester City B team playing in the lower divisions? I can't see any reason in that.
Last one from me. What have you had a highlight this season across the board? It can be whatever you like.
A highlight? Well, obviously the semi-final and the way we responded, and now it's been like most managers. I was talking to Paul Lambert last week, and I think we're all just exhausted by it. It's been relentless, enjoyable. We've had a wonderful 8-9 months with it, and overall, we're very, very satisfied of what we've done, and we've got a cup final to look forward to. There's obviously certain results that you can remember. Well, first away one against Newcastle in particular was quite sweet for myself, and I shouldn't say this really, but beating Sunderland 3 times wasn't too bad either.
Can I just ask you about, not so much your highlight, but you set yourself a target of 10 wins and you secured the 10 wins. And what kind of targets you'll set for yourselves next season?
Well, that's my job. I've got a board meeting this afternoon, and there's something inside of me it only lasts a minute with me, success. And it's been a success at the moment. We've stayed in the Premier League and qualifying for Europe. And of course, we've got the FA Cup final to look forward to, but it's how we now move on. As we said before the interview, there's behind the scenes, there's all sorts happening with the academy. I think that's vitally important for the club. And of course, we've just seen Fulham get relegated, who've been in the division for 13 years. We've seen Norwich have the biggest investment probably that they've made last summer, and Cardiff invested heavily on the squad and not been quite good enough. So for me, it's how do we improve? How do we get better? How do we make the club better? And that's the one thing I'll strive for. We're making big changes at the training ground. The facilities are going to improve. The academy's going to improve. And of course, I need the first team to improve too. Otherwise, you just stand still. And you can't stand still in this league, because if you do, then we're always going to be realistic that, in a great season, we'd love to be competing at the other end. We're always going to be in the bottom half of the Barclays Premier League. There's nothing wrong with that. We've got to make sure that we can stay in it and keep growing the club and making it better.
Well, that brings me to my next question, which is obviously you've got to think about recruiting for next season. Some players will inevitably leave, some will come in.
Yeah.
Does the FA Cup get in the way of that, do you think?
Sorry about that.
That's your new player. So does the FA Cup get in the way of that? Or are you able to recruit as normal?
We've been working behind the scenes. It would be wrong of me not to be saying, right, okay, what we're going to do for next year. Of course, everybody be scouring the Bosman list, who's out of contract, and we're not alone in that. I suppose shows every club would be doing that. So we have been working away to have people in mind, how to improve. the FA Cup really hasn't gotten the road of that. We've got 4 or 5 players out of contract. Obviously, I'll be speaking to them after the cup final, because it would be wrong of me now to start talking about contracts and all the rest of it the week before an FA Cup final. So we'll get the cup final out the road, and then we'll see what we're going to do.
You pulled an incredible rabbit out, well, 3 obviously, but you know, I was thinking that this time last year Huddleston arrives in the close season, a big signing for the club and for the city, and hasn't he done well? And I just wonder if the attraction of European football might be an extra carrot that you can dangle in front of players nowadays.
Well, it can be a carrot, but undoubtedly the biggest carrot we've got of this club is to be in the Barclays Premier League. Make no mistake about that. It attracts players. It attracts players where you wouldn't be able to attract them in the Championship. So of course Europe's that extra little thing that everybody's going to look forward to, playing in Europe, and it'll be a fantastic achievement by everybody, and people look forward to it. The Barclays Premier League for me is the attraction that most players have got, because they're going to go and play week in and week out in the biggest and best league in the world, and that's what we can offer.
And clearly, you know, Leicester coming up lots of points, they'll recruit heavily, they've got wealth behind them. Villa, I can imagine, you know, they will go through big changes this summer. It's going to be a harder division next year. You're going to have to improve.
We are, listen, in my experience, and I've been doing it 10, 11, 12 years in the Premier League, it's always hard. And as you've just seen, Fulham have been in for 13 years and have dropped out. Norwich had the biggest investment that probably the club's ever made last summer. They've dropped out. Cardiff spent 35 million on 4 players or whatever it was. They've dropped out. So we're under no illusion of how difficult it's going to be. But we're realistic enough to know to say, right, how do we make the club get bigger and better? And for where we were 2 years ago to where we are now to this day is quite remarkable. My aim is to say, what's the next 2 years, 3 years? And if we can leave, you know, managers, players, we all come and go. The one thing is, if you can leave a football club in a really healthy state, then that's got to be my aim.
And just one more for me about the cup final. You mentioned, you know, the likes of McGregor and Aluko on the verge. Chester, any chance?
Well, I'm not going to rule him out. I'm not going to rule him out, and that goes for McShane, and it goes for all of them, you know. However, the one thing in common sense is a big FA Cup final, you can't be taking chances, you know, and when you've got 3 or 4 like we have, you know, they're all desperate to play. I can understand that. You know, if there wasn't an FA Cup final next week, McShane, McGregor, Aluko and Chester certainly wouldn't be involved. However, there is. It's the biggest opportunity they're probably going to have in their football career. So they're doing all sorts to make themselves fit and available. And that's great by me. So I've got to make sure that when we do play in this cup final, that in my experience with Wembley and a cup final or a semi-final, if you're not 100% fit, you've got no chance. So it's a big week coming up for all of them. Let's hope I decide right and pick right and pick the right team.
Are they going to this oxygen chamber to speed up the recovery?
I don't think we've been to that just yet, but they're trying everything else. There is one, is there?
Just quickly on McGregor, what an achievement from 6 weeks ago when you thought the end is nigh, kidney problems, the works.
Yeah. Well, I went to see him the next day. And I think I've told the story before. You know, people don't realise he was in intensive care. And I seen him and I said, "How are you?" And he said, "I'm not too bad. I'm pain-free at the moment." I said, "The doctor says it's going to be 6 weeks." I says, "Okay, well, just take your time and see how we go." And he says, "The cup final is going to be in 7. So from that day and that bed, he was determined to make himself available. And, you know, with McGregor's injury, it's either healed or it's not. It's not like a muscle injury or something like that. You know, it's a kick, obviously a bad kick, but the kidney seems to be okay, and his ribs seem to be okay. Touch wood. So we'll see how he is.
Awesome, thank you.
Steve, just talking about the England thing, you said we all want England to do well. Isn't it one of the problems that actually the majority of Premier League clubs, owners, managers, players, don't really give a stuff about it?
Well, we should, and I'm English, and I want
Well,
England.
you're patriotic,
I want England to do well, and the problem we've got the biggest and best product in the Barclays Premier League. There's no question about that. When you see viewing figures around the world, we're allowed to track the best players. Probably that's where lies the problem. You know, we've got all these great players, you know, and we're bringing them all from all over the world. They all want to play here. But of late, we've seen the emergence of people like Barkley and Sturridge, and there's a lot of good young players, Henderson, Sterling. We've now gotten a few through where we think, well, you know, these are really exciting, good young players. So it's difficult because we're in a situation, and of course the market abroad, for example, now if I'm recruiting for next year, I'd love to bring in 5 or 6 English, British players if I could. It's not quite possible because of the finances involved, because if you have got a young British English player, then they're a lot of money. So you get arguably better money, better value for your money abroad, and that's what we all face. We've got to get, you know, players to play at the Barclays Premier League level, and that's not easy.
Steve, one I didn't ask about, James Chester in Wales.
Yeah.
Do you welcome that?
Well, I didn't realise his mum was Welsh. I didn't realise that at all, and I've been trying to speak to Chris Coleman for a couple of weeks on it. We keep missing each other. Well done to him if he wants to go and play in international football. I don't think he'll be playing much this summer because we've got to get this hamstring right. I mean, he had a really severe injury, hamstring-wise, against Newcastle, and he was out for 12 weeks, and then unfortunately re-injured it again. It's a third time it's happened to him. So we have to make sure that he's 100% fit, but fantastic. Next year they're playing the European Championships and all the rest of it, and if he's decided to be Welsh, then good on him.